everybody. Welcome back to another great episode of the Red, White, and You Show with yours truly, the military medium. Today, I have with us a former Navy SEAL commander turned mindfulness and meditation teacher. Yes, you heard me right. He's a Naval Academy graduate, so he went to college. He's a smart guy. he's got a master's in operations research from the Naval Postgraduate School. And Jon has served in Iraq, Afghanistan, off the coast of Somalia, and a lot of other places. He'd have to kill you if he told you. So Jon brings, what I love is Jon is bringing mindfulness and meditation to high-performing teams and aid in dealing with stress, anxiety, depression, all while increasing focus, creativity, and productivity. I just love this. And today he's here to talk about all of that, Veterans Path, his podcast, and everything in between. Jon, welcome to the Red, White, and You Show.
Hey, Dean, thanks for having me, man. Great to be here. And I will put a caveat in there that just because I went to college doesn't mean I'm smart. And if those listening didn't go to college, it doesn't mean you're not smart.
I love it. I love it. No, it just kind of giving you a playful tease, but at the same time, it's like, yeah. So, but no, very cool. So, a little bit about your background, obviously, right in your bio. You were a Navy SEAL commander. How many years were you in the teams?
So I was in the Navy for almost 24 years,
Oh,
17
wow.
of which was with the teams, or associated with the teams.
Okay.
If I wasn't at the team actually, then I was attached to a special operations element, one
Sure.
of the larger, higher up elements, but somewhat associated with special operations for 17 of that 24 years.
Wow. Wow. Very cool. Well, first off, thank you for your service. I know you hear that quite often, but it's so rightfully so. And the piece on that is, how did you, was this something in buds? Was it something that you learned in the military that you're like, trying to find, maybe dealing with your own adversity, that you started getting into mindfulness and meditation? How did that all come about?
Yeah, I wish it had been that early in my career. It was definitely not. It was only a handful of years ago, but through the time in the Navy, um, battled with some stress and anxiety and depression myself. Ended up on various medications to address those, and it did address those. And I think there's a time and place for those medications. But it also kind of numbed me to any of the fun and good sides of life.
Right.
So I just kind of felt that I was going through the motions, kind of a hollow shell of who I used to be, and I wanted to come off those medications so that I could start experiencing the joy of life again. And I spoke with one of the counselors that I was seeing, and he recommended if I come off the medication, that I try meditation.
Mm.
And at first, I kind of laughed at him, and it's like, well, that's some hokey stuff that
Right.
hippies do, or it's for the monks who live up in the Himalayas. It's not for this guy. And he showed me some very high performing individuals that were practicing it, showed me the data, the physiology behind it. And then he told me about how I could use it to enhance my performance. And that's something that SEALs are always kind of looking for, is to gain an edge. So
Right.
I started to practice just very easy, downloaded an app, downloaded Insight Timer on my phone, used that just for a couple of minutes a day for a few weeks, and went back to him and I was like, "Hey doc, it's not working for me." And then he laughed at me, and he said, "Well, that's like going to the gym for 2 minutes a day for 2 weeks and thinking that you're going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger." And obviously, it's not how it works. So I ate my humble pie, and I walked out of his office, and I started practicing for a little bit longer every day. And after about 8 weeks or so, I was up to two practices, a day of about 15 minutes each. And that's when I started to really notice the long-term effects of practicing, and not just the sitting down for two practices of meditation a day, but also practicing mindfulness throughout my day.
Mm.
And I was able to come off the medication. The depression didn't come back. the anxiety and the stress were still there, but I had the tools to address them and process them properly.
Right.
And then I was able to enjoy life a lot more,
Nice.
connect more with my family, connect more with my colleagues at work, focus more, and yeah, that's what I do now. Is I
Yeah.
teach mindfulness and meditation,
Right.
and I work for Veterans Path that also does
Right.
that.
Right.
So
And 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 before we get into Veterans Path, because we know that we want to address that as well, that great organization. So one of the things that I found personally with meditation is there's so many types. There's not just one way of meditating, right? And what I found personally is that, like, a lot of times people get bored with it. Like, nah, I don't like the guided meditation. Nah, I don't like this. I don't like looking at a candle. Nah, I don't like, I don't know, sniffing, you know, uh, essential oils or whatever during
right,
my. So I guess what would be your guidance for somebody that's trying to start meditation, and trying to find something that works for them?
right. Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there at the very end. Is you got to experiment and find something that works for you. So
Right,
some people like the transcendental meditation where there's a mantra that they repeat over and over, and that's what they're focused on through that meditation. Some people like mindfulness meditation where they're just focused on the very present, sometimes using the breath as an anchor. Some people like sensory awareness where they're focusing on, the sense of smell, like you mentioned before, the sense of hearing. um, those are all different types. So experiment and find something that you
right,
like and works for you, but also start small, start easy. Much like going to the gym, you're not going to jump under 300 pounds on the bench press day one.
right,
If that's your goal, you're going to work up to it. Much like running marathon, if that's your goal, you're not going to go out and run 26.2 miles on day one. You're going to
right,
work up to it. So if your goal is to get to a 15, 30, 45-minute meditation, start small, start with 2 minutes, 3 minutes, something small, something easy, and allow your mind to wander off, because that's what's going to happen. And then when it does wander off, notice it and then just bring it back to whatever anchor you're using. So if it's your breath, if it's your sense of smell, if it's the mantra, bring it back. Your mind is going to wander. That's what's going to happen. It's like
sure,
your heart. You can't stop your heart from beating, or you can't stop your mind from wandering. But when it does, don't beat yourself up about it.
right,
Notice that it's wandered off, and then bring it back. And that very action, coming back over and over and over, actually rewires neural pathways in your brain, so where your ability to concentrate and focus is improved over time. So if you sit down for 2 minutes day one, and you notice within 30 seconds that your mind has wandered off, just bring it back. And then, day two, it may be 35 seconds before. And, by eight
sure,
weeks or so, you may be up to 5 minutes before you notice that your mind has wandered off, and just bring it back. And that very act physiologically rewires the brain and changes the way that you practice, and changes the way that you
sure,
feel.
sure,
So
sure. And does that go back to also muscle memory? I think about, in military aspects. So if you think of maybe doing, so maybe CQB drills, or doing, it's maybe something simple like mag changes, dry fires, whatever. In the military, you do it over and over and over and over again until it becomes muscle memory. You can do it in your sleep, and all somebody has to do is say something, or you see a situation and you react without even thinking. And because your muscles and those neural pathways you talk about, do you find that even by doing that, maybe you're not physically doing it, but yet even mentally exercising the
absolutely.
mental muscle?
Absolutely. I mean, that's all muscle memory truly is
Right,
it's
right,
just developing those new
right.
neural
Yeah,
pathways.
right.
And yeah, well, first of all, I miss the days of CQB and dry firing and mag changes.
Right,
But yeah, it is definitely developing new neural pathways,
right,
getting used to sitting for some period of time. I mean, we're all constantly racing from one meeting to the next, from one job to the next, picking up our kids at daycare or whatever.
right.
As a matter of fact, I think that may have been why I had to originally reschedule our meeting. It had something to do with our kids. But
Sure.
anyhow, the bottom line is we're constantly all over the place, and our minds are scattered. And when you sit down for 5 or 10 minutes, sometimes that's uncomfortable,
Right.
uh, both physically and mentally. And then just spending time with it, it does develop that muscle memory
Right.
over time, so that you can do it. And the other thing is, I've spoken with people about practicing, and they're like, well, when I get stressed out, I can't think about coming back to my breath. Well, that's because that's the only time you think about trying to use that practice. Well, that's just like, again, going back to the CQB example that you used, right? If the only time we did CQB was when we were trying to take down a house and take down an enemy, we wouldn't be very good at it.
Right.
So we practice it over and over and over when there's no enemy. When we're practicing with our teammates, we sit down after each run and we're like, okay, what did we do wrong? What did we do right? And learn from that.
Right.
Well, if you sit down and you meditate or you practice mindfulness when there's no stress, when it's just nice and peaceful, that allows those neural pathways to develop so that when you are stressed out, that's your automatic default. You're like, okay, I'm stressed out. I'm not going to fly off the handle. Rather, I'm going to go back to my breath real quick. Just take 2 deep breaths, reset, and kind of recalibrate that parasympathetic nervous system, and go into a situation, um, stressed out, but come out a lot cooler, a lot more level-headed, and thinking
Right.
rationally rather than thinking with your amygdala, which is your fight or flight freeze
Right. Right.
mechanism. So that's you've got to practice it, get that muscle memory down in times when you're not stressed out, so that when you are and you want to use it, it's there for you.
You know what I love is, meditation for some, I think you brought it up, was, a lot of people perceive meditation a lot of different ways, right? Like, oh, it's too new agey, it's all hippie shit, it's all this, it's all crunchy, it's, whatever term or label somebody gives it. But in reality, it's really backed up by a ton of science.
Yeah,
And saying it's not that, but that's what we perceive because either for some, we may have had some type of experience, but for others, it's just what we've seen or been told, or just a perception, right? And
right.
it's interesting when you talk about the when you take away the what I call the woo woo. When you take away the woo woo factor, it's
Yeah,
not all weird. It's
no, it's
actually
not.
backed up by science, and
Right.
it's
And that
yeah,
was the stigma that I personally battled with,
yeah.
originally too. When that doc first told me, I was like, well, that's flowery stuff, snake oil, doesn't really work. That's not for that's not somebody that's not for somebody in 2015.
Right,
It's not for a 6'2" uh, military member. Hey,
yeah,
this is not for me. And what's funny is he also, and you talked about it being new age. And
right.
that's what people think. It's not new age at all. It's
No,
ancient. And it's funny. It's also started with some of our most ancient warriors. You look at the Spartans, you look at the samurai. They practiced some form of meditation and mindfulness in their own
right,
right. Obviously, they didn't call it that, but they wanted to be in the right mindset when they stepped onto the battlefield. So before they would get onto the
right,
battlefield, they would sit down and practice. And and somewhere along the line, it got morphed into this practice for the weak of mind, when it's exactly the opposite. It's for those who want to strengthen their minds and who have
right,
the
right,
mental, I don't know, fortitude to practice, to sit back and say, you know what, I need to calm my mind. I need to
right,
focus on the here and the now. I don't want to be scattered all over the place. And,
right,
and that's another thing in this day and age. You talk about new age. It's almost like being hyper busy is a badge of honor. Like if
right,
somebody's like, oh, I don't have time to speak to you until, you know, 3 months from now, that's their badge of honor. But when you really distill their schedule, they probably do have time. It's just that they're so scattered that it's taking their entire day to get through, I don't know, 6 hours of work. Like
right,
if you literally sat down and focused for 6 hours, you could crush that 6 hours of work. But when you're all scattered, it may take you 7, 8, 12 hours to do that. And that's why a lot of the times people perceive that they are so busy when in fact they're not as busy as they
Is
think.
that one of the things that you talk about? And that's where I was going to kind of go with it. So it's great that you segue into that. Is, the how to, basically take the mindfulness, and where does the mindfulness plug into either the corporate world, or it doesn't matter what you're doing, but is that with the, when you increase your focus, creativity, and productivity, is that basically it? Is where you're kind of clearing your schedule or in your mind
Right.
so you can get more done in 6 hours than what it typically takes you in
Yeah,
12?
exactly. Exactly. I mean, that's basically what you're doing is settling your mind like a snow globe. When you set that snow globe
Right,
down, all the snowflakes kind of settle to the bottom, and you're
right,
able to focus on the picture that's within that snow globe. That's what your mind is doing when you settle down, or rather, when you sit down to practice meditation, or
right,
when you just do a very simple mindfulness drill. And I'll get into the difference here in a second. But when you do those two, that clears and settles your mind so that you can focus on the here and now and focus on what it is you need to do, whether that is taking care of your children at home, spending time with your spouse and being very attentive and aware of what is going on in the conversation and the time
right,
that you're spending with one
right.
another, or whether it's focusing on your to-do list at work or at home. It keeps you focused, clears all that noise, and allows you to not only stay more focused, but also communicate better with your colleagues. So if you're trying to communicate something that you need to get
Sure.
across, it comes across much more clearly. You can communicate your point to those who you need to get, who you want them to get something done. I don't know if that sentence made sense, but hopefully it,
Yeah.
it came across right. Um, and then, yeah, that was probably poor communication about communication. Anyhow,
It's all right. I
yeah,
figured it out.
yeah. And then it also, the corpus callosum, that's the part of the brain in between the two hemispheres, that part of your brain starts getting worked more often. So that if you are not a very intuitive person, you're probably tapping into this part of your brain that's not intuitive. And if you're not very creative, the same thing. Whereas when you start practicing mindfulness and meditation, that corpus callosum starts working and the two hemispheres start working together more so that you can actually be more creative in life and at
Sure.
work. And I'm not just talking creative as in, hey, painting and playing music, but more creative problem solving. So that's where it comes into play in the corporate setting as
Sure.
well. So productive communication and problem solving.
You brought in the aspect of or the intuitive aspect into the conversation, and can you share a little bit what your interpretation is when you use that term?
Yeah, my interpretation of intuition is really similar, almost synonymous with emotional intelligence. Being able to pick up, the unspoken communications, be able to pick up on body language, be able to pick up on just the mood of a setting, an organization, or an individual person.
Sure.
So when you're talking with your colleagues, you may be able to pick up when they're down and maybe take them out to lunch or ask them how they're doing. Find out a little bit more than just giving them a
Sure.
task and going to work. Same thing with your family. When you're dealing with your significant other, whether it's a spouse or girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever the case may be, you can pick up on their unspoken cues. And I think that's when that emotional intelligence or that intuition kicks in
Mm,
and really pays dividends. When you have that, when you're able to tap into it and you weren't able to before, you're able
yeah.
to pick up on those cues and then make things happen that need to happen to
I love
improve
how
the
you bring
relationship.
up uh, emotional intentions and the cues, right? And you were talking about the unsaid things. Do you
Right.
also find that is a great, in my words, in Dean's words, a bullshit detector? It's like they're not saying what or there's a hidden agenda here. Like you just know,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
saying my intuition's telling me like there's something you're conveying to me, something completely different than what you're talking about.
Yeah,
and
100%. So
and
that's
like if they're hiding something or and saying no bullshit, like you throw the flag, right? and
yeah, yeah.
and sometimes you can call somebody out or just saying, yeah, I wouldn't trust that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And,
Either way.
obviously that comes into absolutely. It goes both ways, right? You can pick up on the good
Right.
things that you need to pick up on the unspoken word in a romantic relationship. You can pick up on that, but you can also
Sure.
pick up on the unspoken word in a business transaction.
Right.
And that obviously comes into play a lot in the corporate world.
Right.
So if you can pick up on that, you can kind of figure out who you can and can't trust, who you can and shouldn't work with.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Perfect. Perfect. I love that. I love that analogy. One of the things that I loved is kind of going back a little bit again. You did I think it was with one of your uh one of your kids, like glitter a glitter toy or whatever, and you're talking about,
Yeah,
talking about meditation and
right,
everything, and I thought that was really cool. I was just kind of snooping a little bit to, I was like, hey, let's check out some of his videos before we do everything. But what also spoke to me was maybe something, again, maybe it was unsaid, but you know you were talking about meditations, and for those that um have kids, maybe they have that sensory toy. Maybe they have, maybe, and that was another thing that hit me too. I was like, God, I never thought about using one of those kids' sensory things where you flip and it's got the
right,
stars and the glitter and all the, you can watch it slowly cascade down, or it's very soothing for some.
right.
So I think there's so many different things that that a person can use, but it was great uh, that I was, with that video. But
Yeah, thank you.
um, yeah, it was cool, and I was like, oh, that's awesome.
Similar to the snow globe analogy, right? Is just watching that settle is
Right,
exactly what happens in your mind. But then literally just watching it settle,
right,
even that calms your mind. And that's exactly what I do with my daughter. I show her that, and when she's starting to get a little upset, I show her
right.
that, and I'm like, hey, this is like your mind. Let's just put it down and calm down. Or I'll even teach her to, take some deep breaths, um, to try to really instill that
That's
practice at a very young age so that she can be more resilient throughout her life with
that's
these
so awesome.
practices that I wish I'd learned at
That
that
well, and
age.
that's so awesome that you bring that up, because I was going to ask you that towards the end. Is that something that you're teaching to your daughter now? Um, and then now you're a newly you're expecting again, aren't you? You and your wife?
Yeah, yeah,
Con-
number 3.
Yeah,
So I've got a
congratulations.
3-year-old little girl and a
Yep.
1-year-old little boy,
Boy,
and expecting number
you're gonna
3.
guys are gonna be busy. You're gonna need some
Yeah.
mindfulness and the
Oh,
yeah, right.
100%,
But
100%.
I was gonna ask you, because your kids are so young yet, and as they grow up, if that's something that you've been encouraging with them, because as kids, this is a great time, right? Because they're learning, they get in these
Right.
emotional states, and you know whether it's, hey, I didn't get what I want, or whatever the case is, and about how to calm themselves down, instead of course, kids are always, they go through the biting stage, the hitting stage, right? All
Yeah,
these,
yep,
and instead of, what would be cool is encouraging, saying, okay, remember, whether it's a toy or whatever, but how do you develop this in
right.
stages? And by the time your children are your age now, I mean, with all these tools, think how cool that is. I mean,
Yeah, that's
maybe they'll be the next yogi on top of the, on the mountaintop, right?
right, right.
That was all due
Yeah,
to my
no,
dad.
I think I think it's very important to kind of start instilling these practices.
Right,
Once you believe in them, you've seen the difference that it makes in you,
right,
then you definitely, why would you not want to instill these practices in
right.
your kids,
Uh,
teach them about them? I have a friend, Dr. Teresa Larson, Marine Corps veteran, and she and I actually do some work together on mindfulness and body movement,
Sure.
and she and I both have 3-year-old kids, and she says they're three teen or what is she? Three-nagers.
Teenagers,
Uh,
I love it.
yeah, because they s- they've started to ask all those questions when they're 2. Now they've learned all the answers and they think they know everything.
Yep.
And it's funny, when my daughter was 2, she was actually better at doing the breathing drills than she is now. But
Mm,
I'm still trying to instill it in her. Hey, look, right before we go to sleep, do some breathing. If she starts to get upset, I, hold her on her shoulders, not grab her, but hold her on her
Right.
shoulders and just, hey, baby, let's do some breathing. And
Right.
I'm sure, if somebody had told me 6, 7 years ago that I'd be, standing in front of my 3-year-old daughter trying to tell her to breathe so that she can
Right.
calm down, I definitely would have not believed you. But yeah, it does. You can see,
Right.
the after they're going through a tirade or whatever,
Right.
yelling at, once they do the breathing, the blood kind of returns to their face, and
Right.
they calm down, and it's pretty wild to actually see it
Yeah.
happening in somebody at that age. But it's the same exact thing that I was
Right.
mentioning before, in that your amygdala has hijacked your body. You're reacting rather than responding. And when you tap into the parasympathetic nervous system, whether you're 40 or whether you're 4, the results are the same. Your
Right.
respiratory rate decreases, your blood pressure decreases, your pupils are no longer as dilated as they were. You're not sweating. Yeah, there's just everything,
Right.
that you calm down. So, but it's pretty wild to watch in a
What
three-year
you
old.
you wait, well, right. And since you brought it up, I have a question. So, you know, we have these, for anybody that has kids, and whether you do or not don't, but have you found being a parent and being more conscious or aware of yourself, have you found when you're able to be more mindful or calm in maybe a stressful situation, do you find that your kids respond differently to a stressful
Oh
saying,
yeah.
hey, let's calm down, and where you ease? So, and I also put it in the same thing of having um, a very confident and competent leader in the military, that maybe, bullets are flying or whatever the case is. And then, but when you're looking to that individual, if somebody's scared, if your doctor's scared going into surgery, I think that would probably put me on edge, right? But if you have somebody that's very
Yeah.
calm, have you found that your kids responding to your state of awareness?
Percent. They feed off of the energy that you
Yeah.
put out, and much like you hit on there, as a military member, your military leaders, you feed off the energy that they put
Right.
out. Really, anybody, if you are
Right.
working for anyone and they're a leader and they're, for lack of a better term right now, a spaz, if
Right.
they're kind of
Right.
all over the place,
Right.
then you feel that anxiety and you feel that stress.
Right. Right.
Um, Whereas if they're super calm, cool, and collected, that energy also flows down,
Right.
and you start to feel a little bit more confident in the situation, and
Right.
you feel more confident in them as a leader. But yes, same thing with the kids. When they're starting to lose their minds, and mom and dad start to lose their minds as
Right.
well,
Right.
it spirals out of
Spiral. Right.
control.
Yeah.
And if you're, as the adult, if you're able to get control of yourself, then your kids can settle down as well. Now, granted, I'm speaking as a father of a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, so I
Right.
haven't had teenagers,
Right.
but because I think they're a whole different animal from what I understand. And
Yeah.
I've been a teenager myself, and I was a
Right.
different animal. But yeah, for the young kids, it definitely works.
Yeah, you just add in the eye roll and the door slamming into it, and
Right.
right. I get it. But yeah, and I saw the correlation, and one of the things, a lot of times I think we hear so many times these, we almost say them cliches, but like, one bad apple spoils the bunch, and but anybody that's been in the military, anybody that really has been in a stressful situation, if you're with the bunch of other people, then like you use the word spazzing out or pinging out, whatever,
Right.
they're stressed out and they don't know how to react in a calm manner to work through the steps to get themselves out of this current situation. Like you said, it creates this negative spiral that just feeds, right, that the
100%.
negativity in it that can be it's almost like you want to hit somebody with the 2 by 4 and say, "Snap out of it."
Yeah, and we've all, like, we've all been in situations where we've kind of lost
R-
our minds, right?
right.
Kind of
Yep. Absolutely.
gone off the deep end. And when we do, and if we remove ourselves from the situation, whether it's,
Yep.
we walk out of the house or whatever, and that's us calming down, right? We notice the changes in our physiology when we do that, when we walk out of the house and slam the door and we're like, I've had enough, I'm out of here, right? um, as soon as you walk out, you start tapping into that parasympathetic nervous system and you start calming down. Well, having practiced meditation again in calmer settings so that now you've got those
Right.
neural pathways set up, having practiced mindfulness in calmer settings so that you've got those neural pathways set up. Now, when you fly off or you start to think you're going to fly off the handle, you start to notice that you're going to fly off the handle, take a couple breaths. That's the same exact thing as stepping out from the situation, and you're able to calm down. You're able to bring yourself back under control and start thinking more rationally. And not only thinking more rationally, but taking into account the other person's feelings.
Mm,
So you have empathy and compassion. So going back to that whole intuition piece and that emotional intelligence, now you're able to tap into that and say, you know what? I was going to say these words in this tone, and how would that have been received by my spouse or my child or my
right.
colleague at work?
Right.
It would most likely not have been received well. And then you can kind of backtrack and get things back under control, calm down,
Right.
de-escalate the situation, and really 99 times out of 100, the outcome of that is going to be way better than if you lost your
right.
mind. Yeah,
Right. Right. Yeah. Absolutely. I love it because talking about just, I mean, could go on all day about different scenarios, but I think it's going to be different for everybody, and whether you have kids or whether you're, it doesn't matter what you do. But we're all going to be in that situation at some point. It's just how we handle it, right?
right.
So I love that aspect. So let's shift gears a little bit, shall we? And let's talk about Veterans Path. Can you
Yeah,
share with us a little bit, John, what that organization does, and how did it come to be? And
sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. And thanks for the opportunity to speak about Veterans Path. So,
absolutely.
Veterans Path, PATH, it's an acronym because we allow and introduce and bring veterans back to a sense of peace, acceptance, transformation, and honor. So, PATH, peace, acceptance, transformation, and honor. And we do that by teaching them the practices of mindfulness and meditation. And that's to veterans who have hung up the uniform. And we've started working with those who are still in uniform because obviously there's stress and anxiety and depression and within when you're still wearing the uniform, and um, the performance enhancing aspects of mindfulness and meditation is also, we want our currently serving military members to have those performance enhancing aspects. It was founded in 2008 by two women in Berkeley, California. They they were actually anti-war, and then they realized that being anti-war doesn't mean you have to be anti-military. And they started
Mm,
seeing friends of their children coming back from serving in Iraq and Afghanistan and wherever else, and they were hurting. They were hurting mentally from combat. They were hurting mentally from moral injury. They were hurting mentally from military sexual trauma. They were hurting mentally from maybe not serving in combat. Maybe they've trained for years in a combat arms and not have gone, and they haven't stepped on the battlefield. And
mm,
there's a whole different side of the mental health challenges in the military that come with that, with not having served in combat when you've trained so long for it. So anyhow, they saw that these military members were coming back with all this pain, and they realized that their skill sets as meditation and mindfulness teachers, sensory awareness teachers, one of them is actually a Zen Buddhist, and that they introduced these practices. They started introducing them just to their children's friends, and then it grew from there, into a local thing there around Berkeley or uh, Northern California. And then from there, just they're like, you know what, we can turn this into a nonprofit and we can help many more. And then in November of last year, those two women Lee Lesser and Chris Fortin turned over to myself and Dave Drake. So I'm the deputy executive director for Veterans Path, and Dave Drake is the executive director. And just soon after we took over, COVID hit. So
Oh man.
the model of working with people one on one or in face to face groups, that has completely changed. We had to change so that we could survive. Things that we had planned on, implementing a year or two from now, we moved left on the timeline and we started implementing them now with virtual meditations. Um, they're taught live, but they're on a virtual platform. And then hopefully we're going to be doing in-person retreats here now that we have a vaccine, and hopefully within the next few months things will start to settle down. We'll be doing in-person retreats again, and we'll continue with the online stuff as well, because that is much more easily scalable than face-to-face events. So that's what we do: teach mindfulness and meditation to veterans, and now currently serving service members as well.
Nice. Do you know how many people approximately have went through the Veterans Path program to date?
Yeah, yeah. Prior to November of last year, we had about 400 or so having
Nice.
gone through.
Okay.
Since then, since we were able to go to virtual, we've had several thousand go
Oh
through.
wow. Okay.
So we're hoping that in the coming years, when we
Right.
combine the virtual and the in-person retreats, we'll
Right.
have the goal, the vision is that we are at least introduced to every transitioning service member and veteran in the future, so that
Wow.
they have these tools to deal with the stress, anxiety, depression, and hopefully save some lives, because that's a tough part
Right.
of transition, is that feeling of anxiety that comes with a loss of purpose and a loss of
Mm,
mission, and also a loss of identity. And if we can introduce them to these tools prior to them experiencing that loss, then maybe they can deal with it better, and hopefully help to mitigate the suicide rate amongst veterans.
right. Right. No, that's just awesome. And I mean it's something that's certainly needed. And of course we're living in a time that's challenging for every organization, right?
Right.
Um share with us a little bit, because out of that kind of you know you've kind of birthed a podcast.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit what's going on with that.
Yeah, so I've actually got two different podcasts, but they're both centered around mindfulness.
Okay.
The first one is a Veterans Path podcast, specifically for the nonprofit, where we bring both veterans who have gone through our programs and other people who have some type of
Yeah.
interest or history or experience with mental health. We bring them on and talk to them about what it is they've done. It doesn't have to be mindfulness to meditation.
Right.
It could be yoga, or it could be psychedelics. It could be anything where
Right.
people are experimenting with alternative therapies
Yeah.
to drugs. And what's helped them out. Even though
Right.
I say psychedelics, and I,
Right.
I consider psychedelics a drug, but what I mean is big pharma.
Sure.
Um, so
Sure.
so anything other than that. And then the other one is one where I partner with a buddy in New York. His name's Will Schneider, where we just get together every week. We're on Instagram. It's very rough. Hey, just talking on Instagram, men talking mindfulness,
Mm.
and every week we have a new topic within mindfulness, and then we take the sound bites from that and we put it into a podcast. So Men
Oh,
Talking
cool.
Mindfulness is a second podcast that I have.
Oh, fun, fun.
It is fun.
Talking about the Veterans Path podcast, I did see, and I didn't get to listen to it yet, but the um, uh, Jen uh, and Jen Saterly.
Yes,
Yes,
Jen and Tom Satterley, yeah,
yes, yes, yes.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, so great. I saw that and I was like, oh, cool. They had Jen and Tom on. I was like, all right, awesome.
yeah,
Great
they are
people.
great
And
people
I
doing good
mean,
things.
yeah, right.
Yeah,
And yeah, just some tremendous, I mean, and there's just so many tremendous folks out there doing big things. So it's
right.
just really awesome. Jon, where can folks go check out more either about you, Veterans Path, your podcast? Where can they check all that stuff out at?
As far as the podcasts, we are available on all the major podcast platforms, both the Veterans Path and the Men Talking Mindfulness podcasts. As far as finding out more about Veterans Path alone is veteranspath.org. And then we're all on all the different social media platforms, just under Veterans Path. And then to get a hold of me, you can either email me at Jon, Jon, at veteranspath.org, or primarily on social media, I'm on LinkedIn. I am on the other platforms, but I'm more prolific and more active on LinkedIn than I am on the others.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jon. I really do appreciate you taking time today out of your busy schedule to, I know you're a busy dad, husband, and just professional all around, but thank you. And didn't you move this year too? You
Yeah, we
moved?
did.
2020 has been busy for you.
It has. Yeah, we spent almost 6 months in an RV, and I say almost 6 months with a little bit of a chagrin, because I made a bet. I'm a Naval Academy grad, and I made a bet against a West Point grad that we would live in the RV for at least 6 months. And he
Oh,
said, and he's like, "Hey, if you don't live in the RV for 6 months for the Army Navy game, you have to wear Army attire." And the Army Navy game is next weekend, not this
yeah.
coming weekend, but next weekend. So next weekend I'll be wearing Go Army
All
attire, as
right.
much as I don't like that. But
Maybe we'll
I got
use that for the episode art. We'll be like, "Go Army, beat
yeah.
Navy." There you go. I love it. I love it. Jon, thanks so much once
It's
again, not
been
only
fun.
for your service, but what you continually do. And I'm really excited that you were able to join us for this, which is actually, this episode is finishing out season 2, which will air in February. And so we're really excited to spend the last episode of the season with you, and just kind of learn what you guys are doing, and kind of encouraging everybody to go out there and check out the mindfulness and get mindful. Damn it!
Absolutely, exactly. And thanks for having me on the show, Dean. Thanks for letting me share what it is I'm doing, share what it is we as Veterans Path are doing. Yeah, thanks just for everything. I appreciate it. And as we head into the holidays, I hope that you have a wonderful holiday and an outstanding 2021.
All right, Jon. Thank you so much.